Hey, what's up, everyone? I am NoBS, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about surround sound systems. We're going to talk about the different kinds, explain a few terms, and generally just help clear up a few confusions that I hear. We're going to be keeping it pretty high level today, so this is going to be super digestible. We're not going to get into anything too technical, but this should give you a good understanding moving forward to kind of keep learning and setting up your system in a way that you're going to be really happy with. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right in. One thing that I wanted to clear up before we get too far in is talking a little bit about the difference between speakers and channels and drivers. So this sounds kind of complicated, but it's really, really simple, and people just tend to get this confused a lot. In the context of home theater, we usually say a channel. So a channel being one individual speaker. And that seems to go over pretty understandable. People know, okay, this is a channel, that's a channel. Where some people start to get kind of confused is that they'll see something like this, and they'll go, okay, well, there's all these things here, there's other speakers in here, how many channels is this? And the short answer is the vast majority of the time that is going to be a single channel, one channel speaker. There are, of course, exceptions to this, but the way you can kind of think about this is whether you have two drivers like this is a woofer and that's a tweeter. Both of them are considered drivers under that category. Same kind of thing is going on here. So we have four woofers or maybe mid basses. Looks like these are passive radiators. And we've got a ribbon tweeter. We don't need to know what any of that stuff means, but ultimately all of these drivers are going to be working together to produce sound that is coming from a particular area. Hopefully that clears that whole channel versus driver versus speaker scenario up a little bit more. With all that said, I wanted to go ahead and jump into Blender here, where I have made a little virtual scene that kind of gives you an example of what a room might look like. Just an example room. I am brand new to Blender. I've been learning it for like 2 or 3 weeks. If you have any tips, I'd be happy to hear them, but I think this should be good enough to sort of explain what's going on here. Just for clarity, so we've got a little couch here, a little rug to tie the room together, and just the screen. We're going to be starting out by taking a look at what is considered a 2-channel system. So a 2-channel system is really common. This is a really common starting place, and I'm going to be sort of taking you through sort of the journey of if you were to start at 0 and then how you might build up to that, and also talk about maybe where you want to stop. So 2-channel systems are great. If you get 2 good quality speakers, that's going to be fantastic for music. The vast majority of music made in all time is in stereo. So having a stereo system is technically all you need. There are some newer developments where things like Dolby Atmos are becoming a little bit more common. That can and will be its own video at some point later on. But for the scope of today's video, I just know that if all you want to do is listen to music, you're going to be pretty happy with a 2-channel system. Essentially, the way this works is obviously we have sound that comes out of the left and sound that comes out of the right. Through lots of really cool audio trickery and audio engineers working hard, they can actually make 2 speakers really fill up a space. Everything that comes from the far left to the far right of the room and everything in between. There are ways of making that sound kind of travel and sound more spacious and things like that. Good quality speakers will be able to do that for you. The downside of only having a 2-channel system for music is that the vast majority of speakers out there are not going to be able to hit those really low rumbly notes that is going to be present in a lot of music. Things like kick drums, low bass, different tones. So what a lot of people do is they'll go ahead and add in a subwoofer, and I have my subwoofer over here. I'll go ahead and pop that in. So subwoofers are going to really help with bass. You probably already know a thing or two about subwoofers. They produce deep, powerful bass notes when they're good, and that's their job. So they essentially work together with these 2 speakers, and there's going to be kind of an area where the subwoofer is going to start to take over and reinforcing some of that lower end of the music. When we add a subwoofer into this system, it's now considered a 2.1 system, which can get a little bit confusing. So the 0.1 is going to refer to a subwoofer. Now, if we wanted to get a little bit complicated here, we can go ahead and add in a second subwoofer, and that's probably going to be floating somewhere, but this would be considered a 2.2 channel system. You can go on and on and on from there. There are advantages to having more than one subwoofer in a system. That's going to be beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. And subwoofers themselves do get complicated. I will be talking about them plenty throughout the course of the rest of this channel. Realistically, if you're just listening to music, you could be happy with the 2-channel system, but I think a subwoofer is the next upgrade that you make. If it comes between, I'm looking at maybe upgrading my speakers to a new set of speakers, or I'm gonna buy a subwoofer to go with my existing speakers, I would generally say that the latter is the better way to go. Adding a subwoofer is gonna be just gonna give you a sense of depth and power to your music that you're just not going to be able to get without having to spend a lot of money on a standard bookshelf speaker or floor standard speaker as it way. So you may have noticed at this point that I've really only focused on music right now, and that's because I don't really recommend a 2-channel system for anything more than that. With that little tangent out of the way, we're going to introduce what is considered a 3.1 system. And a 3.1 system involves using a center channel. So this might look a little bit weird at first. We have a pair and then we've gone to one additional speaker. What does that one additional speaker do? And the answer is basically everything. I'm not exaggerating that much by saying that. What a center channel speaker is doing is essentially producing all of the sounds that are coming on screen. The center channel is undeniably the most important speaker in your system. If you have a bad center channel, you're not going to be able to hear dialogue very well. If it's good, you're probably going to be really happy. Let me go ahead and unpack a little bit more of what's happening, because I know all of a sudden we have one speaker that's super important. So why is that? That basically comes down to the way that audio is kind of divided up for speakers within movies. Especially there's processing and kind of software that tells different speakers what they're supposed to be doing. This is going to be a trend that you're going to see throughout this video, is that when you add more speakers, they don't just produce the same sounds. They produce, of course, different sounds, and they produce different kinds of sounds for the types of effect that the movie is trying to drive home. I think a really good example of this is if you imagine something like a car, and the car is going to start over here, drive this way, and then drive all the way off to the start at the left and then end all the way off at the right. The way you can imagine what's happening with the speakers is in the car starting over here, you have this left speaker doing its thing. It's going to get a little bit louder, and then it's going to start, maybe when it gets around to this point, it might start blending with the center speaker. So both of these are working together to kind of make that car sound like it's coming from that area. The whole time it's on screen, you have it coming from the center speaker, and then you get basically the vice versa, where it transitions over to the right, and then it fades out. So that's kind of how the speakers are working together in a system to produce those effects. So hopefully that clicks and makes some sense. For a lot of people, I really recommend just getting a good 3.1 channel system and having a nice day. Having a full surround sound system can be really awesome, and it can really add a lot of depth and immersion into your movie watching experience. But when you start adding more speakers, there is some complexity that comes with that. And your room, you might be with a partner that doesn't want your living room to look like a home theater. They might want it to look like a living room. And it gets really difficult to have a good setup that both doesn't look cluttered and also has that, great, powerful surround sound immersion kind of sound. So if you want to do a full surround sound, I recommend that you maybe consider either having a dedicated room for that, if possible, if you've got an extra room you're not doing anything with. But otherwise, I think that 3.1 is a really great way to go. Okay, so the next logical step we're going to take in our surround sound journey is by adding side speakers. That's these guys over here. So this is considered a 5.1 channel system. The job of your side speakers is basically to widen what's called the sound stage, the area that you can hear within a room, how far away things sound like they're coming. So if we think about our example we talked about before, we had that car that was driving from the left to the right. Now what we can do with surround sound is you might be able to hear that car way before it's on screen. You might hear it off in the distance, and it's driving and it's driving and it's driving, and you hear it here, and then it transitions here, and then it goes to the center, and etc. So it's really going to just help create that extra sense where maybe you have a little bit more of the anticipation. Where is that car? I hear that it's coming. Is it coming on screen? It really adds that depth and creates this wider space that allows you to feel a lot more immersed. So side speakers can really add quite a lot. Moving forward a little bit more, we can now talk about what is called a 7.1 channel system. perspective here is a little bit confusing. Let me go ahead and get inside here. So now what we have is 7.1 channel system, and these are rear speakers. So we got our front, left, center, right, our side, 2, and then our rear speakers. And essentially what these are going to be doing is kind of the same idea as the side speakers, but they're going to be producing noises that are going to come from behind us. The biggest time that I notice rear speakers really adding immersion and adding to things is, imagine something where somebody is on screen and they throw something right out into the audience. You're going to hear that initially coming from on the screen, and then it's going to kind of push back through the left and rights, through the sides, and then all the way back. You might hear it either impact or fly past you through those rear speakers. So it's going to add that little bit of continuity and depth. Rear speakers can definitely add to a system. I think that you really start getting into diminishing returns with them. There is less of a benefit to them than I'd say any other kind of speaker you could add to the system. So I think you have to be pretty dedicated. You really want to have like a pretty banging surround sound system for it to be worth it, for them to get set up right, etc. Don't want to spend too much time on that because this is essentially just adding on to the existing setup here. So this gives us our 7.1 channel system. Hope that all makes sense. And kind of just a side note here is this is kind of where theater, especially home theater, was sitting for a long time. In an actual movie theater, you might have something like 4 or 5 sets of different side channel speakers. And those are essentially going to be playing the same role. It's a duplicate of speakers that are in the same area, but just to help kind of fill the room more, give more of a sense of depth and immersion for people that are sitting in different spots. But essentially, this is kind of what audio looked like, home theater audio looked like for a long time. It was only relatively recently that we started breaking a little bit outside of that. And that means I get to start talking a little bit about something called Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos is kind of like the Kleenex brand for this, where they're just the most recognized name, but there is also something called DTS:X, which is different company, same basic idea. We don't need to talk about that difference too much. And what Atmos speakers are going to do is look a little something like this. What are these guys doing? We got them right up by the ceiling. Sometimes you'll see these in different spots. You might see them on top of like floor standing speakers and stuff like that. But the idea is the same, and this is a little bit more of a clear visual. What Atmos is going to do, and DTS:X is going to do, is try and really give you more of a sense of the height in a movie. And also, this is talking about being used for music. The mission, the goal of Dolby Atmos, and the one that they talk about a lot in marketing, is that it is object-based sound. If you can imagine a completely perfect scenario, maybe like a movie theater, the idea is that you could have, let's just say it's a little loud bug that's flying around, and you could make that bug fly around, and you could pretty much be able to pinpoint where it is without having seen anything, without anything on screen. You could go, it's coming from there, and you could point around the screen or rather around the room and be able to know where that object is coming from. So that's really the cool thing about it. Dolby Atmos can really be, when it's implemented correctly, it can be a really big immersion addition. In my personal opinion, if it came down to adding rear speakers, doing a 7.1 system versus doing Dolby Atmos speakers, I would probably err on the side of going with the Atmos system. And this is where the naming scheme starts to get really, really confusing. So we've established that this is a 7.1 channel system, just this stuff right here. So what do we call it when there's these Atmos speakers here? What does that look like? Well, we call that a 7.2.1. So Atmos, in the naming that we use, Atmos is its own next little section, its own little category. So you could have 4, 6, 8 of these. You could have a 7.6.1 system. All sorts of crazy stuff like that. Just be aware that those are channels that are basically mapped differently, and they're generally going to be mounted on the ceiling. Those are going to be doing different things than the other channels in a system. And ultimately, the reason that I say that I would rather go with a Dolby Atmos system over an additional set of like rear speakers is because they are kind of easier to live with. You just have another set of speakers. Let's say you have two in the front. You've got these two. I don't know why I keep trying to describe things when I have my model right here, but you have your speakers here, and then it's just the addition of another couple. These are really off center, but but you just have these extra speakers that are going to go up top. You could also put them maybe on the side over here or something like that. It's less intrusive, and I think that you notice it more than you would with something like rear speakers. So it's just a really good bang for your buck. A lot of movies now are available with Dolby Atmos. It's a very common format to support. Places like Netflix, a ton of their stuff is going to have Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, which is going to increase your your viewing quality. So with all that said, I hope that this has given you a bit of a better understanding about surround sound, how it works, what the namings mean, and kind of just getting your gears turning a little bit about what kind of system that you might want to have in your own house. Hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and get to them. Feel free to add them into the comments. With all that said, appreciate your time. I'll be making more videos on more of this stuff in the near future. I am No BS, and I will see you soon.